It is Thursday, August 5th here at Draft Sharks Studios in Rochester, New York. Welcome to night 3 of the Draft Sharks Invitational. I'm your host, Matt Schauf. With me tonight are Jared Smola and Mike Schoch. Mike steps in for Adam Krautwurst tonight. Adam is drafting in a draft that has just gotten underway. We're going to get to who is drafting against him tonight. But first, a quick rundown of the format for anybody who's not familiar with the Draft Sharks Invitational, which is in its second year, of course. 25-round draft, so 25 roster spots per team. No kickers, no defenses. Best ball scoring. Tight end premium, so it's 1.5 PPR for tight ends. Straight PPR for everybody else. You start 2 running backs every week. Start 3 receivers, 1 tight end, 2 flex spots. It is a super flex format, so one of those 2 flex spots can be a quarterback every week. Basically, every team is going to want to have 2 quarterbacks who can start most of the weeks throughout the year. And unlike most of these expert leagues that you see out there, it's not just for bragging rights. It's not just for fun. Our boss, Lenny Papano, put his own money up, $250 prize for every league winner. We have 6 leagues going this year, $2,000 top prize to the overall winner. That was Peter Overzet last year. He is in tonight's field as well, along with Adam. Mike, I know you had checked out the past 2 nights as an observer. And of course, you're also a competitor in Tuesday's draft coming up for the 2nd straight year. Anything stand out to you so far? Anything that you're watching for heading into tonight?
Yeah, the first thing is I think you guys are very brave going up against the Olympics. As a viewer, I respect that. The first and maybe biggest difference between the 2 drafts was how the quarterbacks played out early. Because the first night you had teams just sort of put off quarterback to the point where I wondered if 1 or 2 of them knew it was a super flex league. And then you had last night, which felt more like I thought it should have looked or expected it to look. So I would say that was one difference. Now, last night, the quarterbacks slowed down, it seemed, after the first round or 2, and then ended up being behind the first night. So I think how teams handle quarterbacks is interesting in all of these. And in the first 2 nights, you did see some variance.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. As you mentioned, we had twice as many quarterbacks in round 1 last night, but by the end of round 3, they were both even. So it was just overall, they didn't go that much earlier. It was just kind of whether it was round 1 or round 2 where people liked them. Jared, anything stand out to you in difference between the first 2 drafts so far?
Yeah, same thing. Just, where those quarterbacks went. I thought the draft last night, in my opinion, kind of nailed it as far as, where the quarterback should go. I do think there should be a gap between, those top, handful of guys and the rest of the pack. So I thought last night's draft was sharp. And, as we look at tonight's draft, it's, kind of mirroring what we saw last night, at least closer to that Wednesday draft than the Tuesday one.
And we're not only going up against the Olympics, but also competing with football tonight with the Steelers and Cowboys playing. I made sure that we were not going to go on before we got our first Mason Rudolph turnover. Fortunately, he took care of that very early in the game, so it didn't really cramp our style at all. Before we get to the picks, and we do have quarterbacks flying off the board earlier tonight, like last night, let's meet the drafters. And it is starting with JJ Zachariason. He is the editor-in-chief at FanDuel and Number Fire. He's the host of the award-winning Late Round podcast. He literally wrote the book on late round QBs, so we'll see where he drafts them here. But even JJ has conceded that we've seen sea change in drafting quarterbacks over the past couple of years. You can find JJ, of course, on Twitter at Late Round QB. He will actually be joining us Tuesday on the Draft Sharks podcast as well, so look for that one. Number 2 in the order tonight is Nick Bakay. He is an actor, a comedian, a writer, a producer. He voiced the cat on Sabrina the Teenage Witch back when I was much younger. He was a writer for In Living Color for those like me who loved that show. So I always like to highlight that one in particular. Contributed football content at ESPN, NFL Network. You can find him on Twitter at Nick Bakay, for real, the number 4. Number 3 tonight, Connor Allen is the director of betting at 4for4 Football. He hosts the Move the Line podcast. That covers betting and fantasy. Yet another who blurs the line between analyst and player. I know you can find him in the high-stakes streets as well. On Twitter, he is at Connor Allen NFL. Number 4, Peter Overzet, last year's champion. Really, I think he kind of defies description more than anyone else in this tournament. You watch some of Peter's antics, I think, and you want to believe he's just a goofball. But the guy is also a smart DFS player, a smart fantasy player, gives real advice. Like I mentioned, he won this tournament last year, so he knows what he's doing. He's on Twitter at Peter Overzet. We'll be watching to see if he attacks this year's draft the same way he did last year, right, Jared?
Yeah, and I wish I had gone back and looked at his team again. I know we had said he had started with the one running back and then kind of ignored the position. I can't remember what he did at quarterback. I guess I can pull that up as we're talking here the rest of the night.
All right.
I don't remember either, but he started with Dalvin Cook and he ended with Mike Davis, and he beat me among everybody else. But I was in his group, and we had him on the deep end twice to talk about his lead and then his win.
That was a good way to bookend your draft last year. It was Dalvin Cook at the beginning and Mike Davis at the end. Number 5, right in the middle of this year's night 3, is Mark Garcia. He is a fantasy football analyst for a 1-week season. He's also the kind of player that can sneak up on you in a competition like this. Mark's not only an experienced player, but he's also an experienced poker player. He's a self-proclaimed game theory nut. So, I mean, everybody in this tournament knows how to play fantasy. Mark is the kind of drafter who's just might be thinking differently than everybody else at any point. I think, sometimes that kind of thinking can go too far and you get yourself overthinking things, but it will be interesting to see where Mark goes. I remember looking at some of his late round picks last year and wondering what the thought process was on those. We had him on a podcast after the last year's draft. So be curious to see what he does with the late round picks. And I mean, we have the draft board going here during the stream, but you can follow the draft even after we finish the stream tonight on the Draft Sharks Discord. You can find that link on the YouTube channel, on any of the podcast feeds from here. So check that out. Mark is at HiLowFF on Twitter. Number 6 in the draft, Justin Boone's the lead fantasy analyst at The Score. He hosts the Score's Fantasy Football Podcast. You might recognize him from the top of the Fantasy Pros accuracy rankings. Justin finished number 1 overall in 2019. He has been among the top 7 each of the past 7 seasons. He is at Justin Boone on Twitter. Number 7 is Chad Schroeder. Quite simply, the top high-stakes fantasy player of all time. If you name an event, he has won it. He's got 24 full-season national titles across sports. I mean, good luck trying to get Chad off his game. I do remember, though, Chad talking about people sniping his picks in this draft in like round 20+. So that kind of shows you the field that we bring together for the DS Invitational. Chad is at ChadSCH23 on Twitter. Number 8's Dave Kluge. He is a contributor at Football Guys as well as Fantasy Pros. You can hear him on the 2 Point Stance podcast and other shows in Football Guys Audible Network. Dave is at Dave Kluge. That's KLUGE on Twitter. Number 9 is our boy Adam Krautwurst. You might know him from our live streams the past 2 nights. He's also Mike's co-host for the Deep End podcast. Adam contributes to Draft Sharks and Team Riserfall, at least when he's not drafting on myffpc.com. Adam took 5th overall in the 2019 FFPC main event. So he ain't scared in these streets either, right, Mike? He's at Adam_Krautwurst on Twitter. You think he's ready for tonight?
Oh, I'm sure he's ready. I thought he was great on these last 2 broadcasts. I don't know what happened. It's got to be the surrounding cast. Right? What's he doing with the Crack Rock name?
I don't know. We're trying to figure that out right now in the chat here. I'm not sure why his team is showing up as Crack Rock. It's not showing up there anywhere else. But yeah, Team 9 is Adam. He's become Crack Rock tonight.
He's an impersonator. Let's see if he cranks the purple like Crack Rock likes to talk about on Twitter. Number 10, Matthew Friedman's the Chief Strategy Officer for FTN Network. He is the Chief Operating Officer of Bets Media. You might remember him from the Action Network, RotoViz, other places. He's a self-proclaimed degenerate gambler and fantasy player. He is at Matt F. The Oracle on Twitter. Number 11 is the team of Jay Reed and Scott Connor. You can find them separately on Twitter or combined at Chase the Helmet. They are high-stakes veterans with 13 total league titles in the main event and Football Guys Championship at myffpc.com. They also won their DS Invitational League last year and finished 3rd overall in this competition. And number 12, Ben Gretsch delivers his fantasy content primarily via his Stealing Signals Substack at this point. Ben calls himself a novice to high-stakes play, but he's a veteran of multiple sites, including CBS recently. He also finished number 8 overall in the first DS Invitational. You can find Ben on various podcasts and at Yards Per Gretsch on Twitter. Now let's get to that draft that has Adam impersonating other drafters. We'll start at the beginning where JJ already told us he's going to take Christian McCaffrey to start things off. Tweeted that out earlier today when they were talking about him having the top spot. Dalvin Cook is the second pick to Nick Bakai's team. No surprise with either of those picks. I mean, sometimes in these super flex drafts, you see a quarterback coming off the board before that first running back, but nothing like that so far in this spot. It's Lamar Jackson, the first quarterback off the board. Mike, How surprised are you to see Lamar Jackson come off before Patrick Mahomes?
I'm surprised to the extent that you just usually would see Mahomes, and a lot of these drafts from the top are pretty similar. But Jared, I don't think it's bad. Like I feel like there's a reasonable argument for Jackson up top. You have Mahomes, Allen, Jackson, Murray, maybe or maybe not Prescott. I think those four guys could come in any order. So I'm okay.
I mean, 12 months ago, Lamar Jackson was, not the consensus number one quarterback, but I think more people had Lamar number one going into last year than Mahomes. To me, why Mahomes is quarterback one is more because the floor. I think he just has less questions than those other top, 3-4 guys. But ceiling wise, I think Lamar Jackson could outscore Mahomes. I think Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, maybe even Dak Prescott could outscore Mahomes. So it's really just the floor that I think for me makes Mahomes number one. But ceiling wise, Lamar could definitely match or beat him.
Would you make a decision like that based on what you think you might get in the later rounds in terms of stacks? Like the Mahomes player net is not getting Kelsey, not getting Tyreek Hill, probably, maybe Edwards-Helaire if they go that route. Jackson, I mean, I saw Jackson with Andrews last night. Jackson and Bateman or Hollywood Brown can always fit. And in Pros versus Joes, when Adam and I drafted, we saw Evan Silva put Jackson with Andrews. So is that something that would you guys think that would enter into the thought process?
Maybe, although I'm not a huge fan of stacking Lamar Jackson because so much of his production comes on the ground. If I'm going that route, I might have gone Josh Allen, although you're probably not going to get Steph Diggs or maybe Kyler Murray would have been interesting. With a chance, Connor there could have gotten the Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins stack. So if that was his thought process, I would have gone somewhere else besides Lamar Jackson. But we'll see what he ends up doing stacking wise.
Yeah, I would think that even with Lamar Jackson, I mean, if you're ultimately hoping that he's going to carry you to a tournament win, you want to get somebody to catch his passes because he's going to bring some of it. But maybe it's less of a feeling like you need to than it is with other quarterbacks.
They're all cheap too, which is the nice thing. At least his wide receivers, Bateman and Marquise Brown both go pretty late, so it's a cheap stack.
Yeah, should have his pick of options there. And then in addition to those, Sammy Watkins is going to be even cheaper, and he's been generating some buzz at Ravens camp so far. It was Patrick Mahomes off the board right after Lamar Jackson to Pete Overzet's team. So we got the returning champ here, and we give him Patrick Mahomes in the first round. It might be a nice start for his draft. Travis Kelce off the board next to Mark Garcia's team at number 5 overall. Then it's Josh Allen at number 6. I'm sure that Adam was hoping that he was going to make it to his team there. Devontae Adams was next at number 7. Darren Waller at number 8 to Dave Kluge's team. Then it was Adam in disguise taking Kyler Murray at number 9. All right, let's finish up the round, then we'll talk about the quarterbacks. George Kittle to Matthew Friedman at number 10, and that's earlier than he's gone the past 2 nights. Dak Prescott, 11th, and then Tyreek Hill to close out round 1. Mike, anything surprise you there beyond the Lamar Jackson pick?
No, that's the list, right? I mean, you might see a group fade on Prescott given his injury situation, but that did not happen here. And I think the rest of it is all pretty chalky. Kittle, you mentioned, is somebody. I liked your point last night about how he seems like somebody there could be a pretty good range of opinions, and you've seen that already in 3 nights, moving up to the point where he's 10 overall here tonight. But quarterback wise, I mean, you saw Herbert go earlier last night and Wilson go later. We found out later that was a mistake. Wilson would have gone in exactly the same spot last night to Scott Fish, but for some technical reason he didn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we already have our first team with 2 quarterbacks, as you mentioned, Russell Wilson. It's the Jay Reed and Scott Connor team took Dak Prescott in round 1, then around the turn got Russell Wilson with the second pick of round 2. Jared, what do you think about starting with 2 quarterbacks like that?
I like it because we had, I believe it was Elliot Christ on the first night open with, I think it was Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson. And I like how his team turned out. So, you're obviously investing a lot at quarterback, but in the super flex format. And again, we talked about with having 25 rounds, you can really build depth at the other position. So I like that if you can get, 2 of those top 6 or 7 quarterbacks.
Those are the 2 quarterbacks that I started with last year. It was round 2 and round 3, I believe, where I got Dak and Russell Wilson. And then, of course, we all lost Dak Prescott 5 games into the season. But, we'll see where Jay Reed and Scott Connor's team go. They're up on the clock in round 3, so we'll catch back up with the action there. Around the turn, though, it was Ben Gretsch at that 12 spot, took Tyreek Hill and Stephon Diggs, and I'm going to skip ahead of the rest of the action because the Chase the Helmet team just took their 3rd quarterback in round 3. It's Dak Prescott, Russell Wilson, and then Trey Lance as the 12th quarterback off the board. Mike, what's your range of reactions here? I feel like there are a number of reactions that can all be competing with each other.
My first is, so Jay and Scott did well in this last year. They were on the deep end with us. They were also in, that was Pros versus Joes, I think also, that Adam and I did, where we had the 1, and they did their broadcast as well. And Adam heard them say that their plan was to draft 4 running backs in the first 4 rounds and then quit. And so this reminds me of that. I don't know if it really correlates at all, but they just put 4 running backs down early in that draft, and they were done with running backs the whole night. So would you bet even money that they wouldn't draft another quarterback tonight? I think I would.
Oh yeah, I'd put it. Yeah, I'd put it at like minus 200 that they don't draft another quarterback tonight.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, if you take Trey Lance as the 12th quarterback off the board, you're expecting him to start. You're also relying on the fact that you already have Russell Wilson and Dak Prescott being insurance against him starting right away. But you're hoping for ultimate ceiling from all 3 of these guys. Yeah. So I think you help that reach for the ceiling by using the rest of those spots on those other positions you've neglected through the first 3 rounds. It's going to be an interesting team to watch throughout this draft, but let's get back on track for the round 2 picks before we move on to what's happening now. Alvin Kamara is the 3rd running back off the board in round 2, the 3rd pick of round 2. So a little bit behind where we've seen running backs, at least on the first night. Zeke Elliott, RB4 after that to Adam's team, then Aaron Jones at RB5, Derrick Henry, RB6, Saquon Barkley, Austin Eckler, Jonathan Taylor, all in a row. We had, 7 straight running backs in the middle of round 2. That kind of matches up with how things went before. Just like last night, we had more quarterbacks than in round 1 the night before. Tonight, we had more in round 1 than in the first night as well, and then just 2 of them in round 2. So catching back up with things, Jared, what do you think about the way players are coming off the board in this one versus the previous 2?
Yeah, to me, the biggest surprise early is just the 2 running backs through 14 picks. That's a few running backs behind what we saw in the first 2 drafts. And I mean, I think to me, Kittle and Stephon Diggs stick out as guys who personally I wouldn't take over the Alvin Kamara, Zeke Elliott tier of running backs. That's kind of what stands out to me. But then we kind of caught up because we had the 7 straight running backs come off the board after that, including Aaron Jones at running back 5. I think the second night in a row where Jones has come off the board much higher at ADP among running backs.
Well, he was RB4 on night 1 to Jack Miller's team. So, yeah, we're seeing some range there. Jonathan Taylor also came off the board a little bit earlier in RB draft position tonight than he did last night. RB9, that's closer to where he's been overall in ADP. So I guess Pete Overzet's not too worried about Jonathan Taylor without Carson Wentz. So we'll see where that goes. I glanced over George Kittle a little bit when we were in round 1, but he went 16th overall the first night. He went 25th overall last night. So that's at the 2-3 turn. A 15 spot jump to where he went tonight, which is kind of more in line with where he is in standard FFPC drafts. But, with the super flex, I think for me, he's the most surprising round 1 inclusion for me tonight.
I just love the running backs. I mean, 2 in the first round. Jared, you said last night, like you were looking at the quarterback variance and said, that's why this is the best format. And when are you ever in a draft where no position is taken, less often than running back or more as often as running back? I'm trying to say 5 quarterbacks around 1, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, 3 tight ends. I mean, that's just, you're not in very many formats where that would ever happen.
Yeah, kind of what we wanted when we put this whole, when we designed this whole league.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Maybe Matthew Friedman, Matt, is thinking Lance in round 4. I mean, there's been so much hype. What player in the league has had more training camp love than Trey Lance at this point? But
Elijah Moore. That's probably it.
Of course, it's rookies, but he might have thought he could put Kittle with Lance, and that did not happen. I wonder if he thought that.
Uh-huh. I would hope that that's not the plan from that early, but it's certainly a possibility, and it would have been reasonable for him to think at QB 14, where Matthew did just take a quarterback in round 4. It would have been reasonable to think Trey Lance had at least a solid shot of being there, but he didn't make it. Going back to closing out round 2, we had Aaron Rodgers going to Nick Bakai's team with the second to last pick of round 2, DeAndre Hopkins around the turn with Justin Herbert for JJ's team. So no late round quarterback here, but not a surprise in the Superflex format. JJ started with Christian McCaffrey, DeAndre Hopkins, Justin Herbert, back to Nick Bakai. Running back, quarterback, wide receiver for him, Connor Allen, followed Lamar Jackson with Calvin Ridley, Antonio Gibson, RB10 in round 3. Probably happy to get Antonio Gibson at that point with how he's been trending lately. A.J. Brown is the third-round pick for Peter Overzet, so quarterback, running back, wide receiver for him. Mark Garcia followed Travis Kelce with Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen, and then he's got Matt Ryan as QB16 in round 4. Justin Boone has 2 quarterbacks so far. Josh Allen in round 1, Ryan Tannehill in round 3 as the QB9, Saquon Barkley in between those guys, and Justin Jefferson most recently. Mike, how are you feeling about Ryan Tannehill? Because I got the takes from the other 2 guys last night.
Yeah, I'm right kind of down the middle on Tannehill. I think the coordinator change is probably not great. The fact that Derrick Henry has been so successful, so prolific, and is still there, I think he's probably the alpha on that team. I mean, overall, you still have Vrabel. So I think probably we're talking about Henry mattering the most. Julio Jones has to stay on the field. If he does, I mean, that's fine. That's good. They're ahead of, I think, probably what they were last year with Corey Davis there, but it's still the Henry show, I think. Brown is tremendous. I feel like maybe what we saw last year from Tannehill was the peak. But, if Henry goes down or if there's a change of philosophy there that we don't expect, that could be wrong. So I like the player okay, and I feel like I'm kind of down the middle on him. I'm certainly not avoiding Tannehill, but I'm neither in a rush to grab him. How's that for a hot take?
I mean, I don't think he's really that hot takey a player in one direction or the other. Some people are like, why are you taking him after this guy? Some people are like, I don't really care about Ryan Tannehill. There's not a whole lot of fire coming from Tannehill camp on either side. Tom Brady went right behind him. I think they're similar, but Tannehill has the rushing upside. Tom Brady has better. Well, I don't know. Jared, does Tom Brady have better receivers at this point? I mean, you say that Tom Brady has better receivers than most people, but now that Tannehill's got A.J. Brown and Julio Jones?
Well, Brady has better receivers because you're comparing Antonio Brown to Josh Reynolds at the third wide receiver spot, and Tom Brady has better tight ends. So, I mean, I think he pretty clearly has better weapons. That the edge to Tannehill is the rushing ability, where that's pretty non-existent for Tom Brady.
Mm-hmm. That's Chad Schroeder's team. Devontae Adams in round 1, Derrick Henry in round 2, Tom Brady in round 3 as the QB10 off the board. Then Joe Mixon in round 4 to his team. Probably happy to get Derrick Henry at RB6, Joe Mixon at RB15. Both of those guys behind where they've been going in RB ADP. Dave Kluge's got Darren Waller, Aaron Jones, Nick Chubb, and then Trevor Lawrence as his first quarterback in round 4. QB15, pretty standard for Trevor Lawrence so far. Our boy Adam has started with Kyler Murray, then Zeke Elliott, then Matthew Stafford as QB11. And Jared, I think he's probably happy to get Matthew Stafford as QB11 because I believe he likes Stafford over Tannehill and at least on par with Brady.
He does. And I like the 2 quarterback, 2 running back start here, but I think Adam's going to be kicked off the DS staff for passing on Joe Mixon there.
I got $10. I know who he picks next.
Oh, maybe we should. So you're not going to say it on here to ruin it for those drafting around him, right? Maybe you can write it down and you can hold it up afterward. It could be like an AGT magic trick.
If you watched our Pros versus Joe's draft, you would know. And if you watched our deep end when he drafted a football guy's team, you would know. It's the same guy. I made him the same offer, $10 that night, but he did not pick this guy. But Adam's closest friends knows he loves him, and he's maybe 40% to make it back to him here.
Ooh, a surprise
pick. It's not the guy that Overzet just took, is it?
No. He likes Hawkinson. That's right.
Yeah.
By the way, can I just throw in on Tannehill one more thing that might be interesting there? And I don't know if this is different than last year, but their defense may be horrendous. And so does Tennessee, with a new coordinator, become a team where when they're losing would throw the ball all the time? I mean, you could fall into some big numbers from them if that happens. I don't know. I still feel like it's Henry's team, but
yeah, I mean, their defense wasn't great last year. Right. They also have 2 games against the Texans. They have 2 games against Jacksonville. I think that's not going to be a great defense. So
They scored like crazy last year. They scored like crazy.
Yes, they did. They did.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see if it was the Arthur Smith effect or if it's the talent that they have on offense. I'm curious to see what the Titans' offense looks like this year. I think we'll get a similar pass-run split. I think we'll get a similarly weak defense. So it will be interesting to see how they choose to run things and how effective they are without Arthur Smith. Najee Harris was the 4th-round pick that he took over Joe Mixon. I mean, I'm not taking Joe Mixon 100% of the time if I'm choosing between those two. What about you, Jared?
No, I'm not. But I mean, in the DS invite, I'm taking the guy I like better. I'm not worried about exposure. So it's Mixon for me. But yeah, I mean they're close enough. Harris, even just watching that game tonight, the first couple of series, he just looks like a guy ready to take on 320 touches this year.
He better be, because I think that's what's coming at him.
My money's on Cooper Kupp.
All right. So now we're about to see if Mike is on the money.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, that would be a DS approved pick if it is Kupp.
You guys would have to tell me how important that is.
It's certainly time for him, although it would be a little bit on the early side. We've seen some other players go similarly early so far. The CeeDee Lamb, by the way, we haven't gotten back to it yet, but the Chase the Helmet duo followed their 3 quarterbacks by taking CeeDee Lamb even earlier than we've seen him go elsewhere. He's been wide receiver 11 in this competition so far. Now he's wide receiver 9 off the board in this one. And lo and behold, Mike was correct. Adam took Cooper Kupp in round 5 as his first wide receiver, as the 15th wide receiver off the board. So clearly likes Cooper Kupp. I'm on board with liking Cooper Kupp. He's in that range in my projections.
Now to take Kupp, he had to pass on Mike Evans, who every single stream he's fouling at his feet. So, and
Hall of Fame. Wait a minute,
he's still out there, but
nobody checked him last night on saying, just matter of factly, he's going to the Hall of Fame. Do we know that? Do we know that Mike Evans is going to the Hall of Fame? I mean, maybe he's got a ring now, if that matters.
Yeah, he's on pace, I'd say, but he's got another 8 years probably to earn that.
Right. I would say he's headed down that path. As long as he doesn't have a Terrell Davis downfall, he should be in decent shape for it. But yes, I mean, Adam was complaining that Mike Evans was the 13th wide receiver off the board last night. And here he goes taking somebody else's wide receiver 15 instead of taking that obvious value and taking a shot that Cooper Kupp gets back to him. Adam, you might have been able to get Mike Evans and Cooper Kupp, and then you could just be laughing your way through the rest of the draft. But
he drafted Stafford.
True.
Yeah. I pushed him in that direction, but still, that could be an example of reaching for the stack over the guy that you like better, if that is Mike Evans.
See, I mean, to me, they're close enough. I do have Evans, like a spot or 2 higher, but they're close enough where if I have Stafford, I probably would have gone Kupp there to get that stack.
Now, speaking of the Rams, we don't see Henderson yet.
Mm-hmm. We are – how many running backs do we have off the board? We
17.
are at RB 17. So, I mean, he tends to be in the 20 to 25 range. We'll see how soon he goes. I'm not surprised that he's not gone yet. I do think he belongs a little bit higher than he has been in most drafts to this point. So, tracking the picks again, we're going back to Adam's Najee Harris pick. From there, we saw Jalen Hurts go just before him to Matthew Friedman's team. That's George Kittle, Alvin Kamara, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, then Jalen Hurts, Dallas Goedert for the Eagles stack there. I'm not even sure how to feel about an Eagles stack right now. There's so much going on. I mean, there are negative reports about multiple Eagles pass catchers at this point. Devontae Smith is out. Zach Ertz is still there, even if his natural hair color is not. Nobody's excited about this passing game. I don't know. With Jalen Hurts, the 14th quarterback off the board here, Jared, what do you think there's value in the stack that Matthew just got?
I still think Hurts is slipping because of the Deshaun Watson rumors. Like, he was pretty consistently going around like quarterback 9 or 10 a month ago. Now I believe in all 3 of our drafts, he's gone like quarterback 12 or later. I still think if he's the starter all year, I feel pretty good saying he's going to beat quarterback 14 just because of the rushing. But I think the risk that Watson comes in there and plays half the season is hurting Hurts' ADP right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think on some of these teams, like most everybody's going to have numerous teams, and you want to take that gamble on Hurts because there's that assumption that you're talking about, and others that are negative toward him that don't have to be right. And in terms of Watson, you might also have Watson on a few of your teams for the same sort of logic, because if he plays, if he's traded, I feel like it'd be incredible if he were on the field, but I talked to John Clayton today on WGR. John's prediction is that Watson plays this year and is suspended next year because they don't have charges on him yet. He's not on the exempt list. He's been at training camp. So maybe Watson pays off too, whether it's on the Eagles or the Texans or someone else. And there's Evans to Adam. So he's probably happy, even though it's not. We know Adam's players better than we know that it's actually him.
Yeah, he just picked up Evans instead of Evans Cup. Mike, I missed a segment with John Clayton. Did he have any insight on where he thinks Watson might be playing this season?
He just said he thought he would be traded and that he would be playing this year, and that next year, once everything gets sort of played out in terms of the legal process, that he'd be suspended then. But I mean, I don't know. It would be really ballsy for a team to put him on the field this year. And if the Eagles were to do that, like has been rumored, what does that mean for Hurts? I mean, Hurts is still a player, just like we look at him in fantasy as somebody with some prospects, like would that just be sort of, they cut his legs out, and would the Texans play him? I mean, the Texans, I think we expect to have them draft somebody at the top of next year's draft. So I don't know. That was interesting about Tua as well, thinking about Watson. Like, would Tua work for the Texans if they were sort of heading toward a quarterback at the top next year? Maybe not. So it's been really tough to figure Watson out. No charges, no exempt list, safety at training camp. Who knows?
I wonder, though, is the NFL, I mean, could we still see the NFL put him on the exempt list once we get closer to games? They're not out of that option, are they? No. And I would expect them to, that'd be my guess, but maybe something has to happen first that hasn't happened yet. To me, I think that they're just trying to put it off as long as they can and hope that the legal side of it does the work for them instead of them having to make a difficult decision whether they let him play without charges or whether they put him on the exempt list without a criminal case moving against him. So I think that they're trying to wait as long as they can. And I think that's
Matt, like if he has 22 different people suing him, right? Like if they had put him on the exempt list after 3 such lawsuits, who would have complained? Like what do they need? I don't know what they need to be able to do that. So they could have done that a long time ago, and who would have complained, right? Who would have criticized them?
I don't know if you guys saw it today. There was one of the women who said she was assaulted. Kind of came out on some YouTube shows, or talking about it, giving some details. That might play into the NFL's decision here. If that kind of goes mainstream, to get him on the exempt list. I'd be surprised if the NFL lets Watson play with all this hanging over his head still.
Yeah, I don't think the NFL likes to make decisions on these things until it has to, and he's not playing any games at this point, so they don't feel like they have to. So they're probably putting it off as long as they can. The Jalen Hurts side, I was always surprised about the Tua rumors because it didn't make sense to me for the Dolphins to give up on Tua that quickly. Jalen Hurts to the Eagles, he was a second-round pick. He's now under a different coaching staff. So, I mean, he's the best that they have right now, but I don't think they have all that much invested in him. So I think if they have an opportunity in somebody that, say what you want about the off-field stuff, if they believe that it's a good move for them, I can certainly see that happening. So the question then becomes whether Jalen Hurts goes back to the other way in that trade. We'll see. We can't really, project that at this point. We'll just have to wait and see what happens. But getting back to some of the picks, Mike, do you have something else on that?
I wanted to quickly get in and double down on my chips and put Overzet on Ayuk.
You got the scouting reports on all these teams.
Some of them. I'm wrong.
Did something happen to Jamar Chase in the last 20 minutes? Because I have not seen him slip to wide receiver 25 as early as he'll go at this point. T. Higgins is off the board, so I'm just surprised that Chase is still sitting there.
Yeah. I mean, we've gotten nothing but negative stuff out of Cincinnati camp lately, so it doesn't surprise me to see him slip a little bit in a draft like this. And we haven't even gotten to the point where he's actually slipping versus praise. We have gotten to the point, by the way, where the Chase the Helmet team started with Dak Prescott, added Russell Wilson, added Trey Lance, and then drafted 2 of Dak Prescott's wide receivers. CeeDee Lamb, we talked about, wide receiver 9 in round 4, Chris Godwin in round 5, and then Amari Cooper at wide receiver 17 around that 5-6 turn. So we've got Dak, 2 Cowboys receivers going on with that team. What do you think of that build so far, Jared?
I really don't like the third quarterback in the third round. I think I talked about it last night. Just drafting a guy in the third round who, one of your top 3 picks is going to be on your bench every week. To me, that's just not optimal. Now, that team's going to be crushing at quarterback every week, but will that make up for the lack of depth? He's probably going to have at running back, it looks like, at this point, because he's solid at wide receiver. So I wasn't a fan of the Lance pick. Lance at quarterback 12 is fine with me, but just going 3 straight quarterbacks. But Dak. The Dak, Lamb, Cooper stack, obviously, that could be massive.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you do that there when you're drafting 11. Also, maybe somewhat concerned that team 12 is going to double up at quarterback, or else you take Lamb or the receiver you want, unless it was DeAndre Swift, I suppose, in that spot. So they didn't even want to wait 2 more picks for Lance.
Yeah. And I get it. I mean, Lance is super exciting. He could, easily beat that quarterback 12 price tag. To me, it's just the structure of, taking 3 straight quarterbacks.
What do you guys think of Ayuk and then Higbee here in these next 2 picks?
For Adam?
Well, maybe Ayuk goes at 7-8. And this is not really what you guys do. So you see, Adam and I are in this.
I bet Adam's eyeing Higbee here.
We're in this bare knuckle challenge, and all I'm doing now with you guys watching your shows is trying to predict everything. So I got to be careful that I have to remember that I'm on the show with you, because that could be annoying.
I started looking for where Ayuk and Higbee were on the board, because I thought you were asking about picks that have been made instead of picks that were in your future.
No, I thought maybe that would be. I mean, if you like Sutton more, that's fine. But Adam and I picked Stafford, Kupp, Higbee in Pros versus Joes, so I wouldn't be shocked to see him do that here. It's time, and he doesn't have his tight end yet, so maybe.
Now, Jared, the team next to Jay Reed and Scott Connor, Ben Gretch's team, has 3 quarterbacks as well through his first 6 picks. Did not go about it the same way that the Chase the Helmet duo did. Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs in the first 2 rounds, Joe Burrow in the third is QB 13 off the board, DeAndre Swift around that turn. That's a 3-4 turn, Joe Burrow, and then DeAndre Swift as the RB13. So clearly Ben Gretch believes in DeAndre Swift's outlook this year. And then Baker Mayfield, Tua Tagovailoa at the next turn, QB 20, QB 21. What do you think of that group to start off his team?
Yeah, I think that's fine. Spending 5th and 6th round picks on your 2nd and 3rd quarterbacks versus 2nd and 3rd round picks. I mean, Ben is, probably hoping that Baker and Tua kind of combine to give him, solid scores out of that 2nd quarterback spot.
Yeah, I'm sure he's looking for all 3 of them. I don't think that Joe Burrow is that far ahead of those guys. He might be. I think the ceiling for Joe Burrow is that far ahead of those guys, but I don't know. The way things are sounding, it might be that trio trying to get 2 starting quarterback scores every week. On the other side of those guys that are sitting at that turn, Matthew Friedman still sitting on the 1 quarterback with Jalen Hurts, which seems like a risky 1 quarterback to sit on right now. But he has followed the Dallas Goedert pick with DJ Moore and then Travis Etienne as his 3rd running back in round 7. RB23, a decent spot for Travis Etienne. There's been a lot over the past couple, maybe not a lot, maybe I just have happened to see it, but multiple people over the past couple of days have talked about James Robinson, quote unquote, clearly being the starting running back in Jacksonville still. What do you think about that, Mike?
Well, it's really tough. Robinson probably deserves it, but that was much easier to call the night before the NFL draft, because once they make that pick, everything is kind of blown up. I like Robinson a lot. It was he's a sentimental choice for me because I had him in a lot of spots and really enjoyed his season. I feel like a guy like that deserves at least another year, in an important role. He's not going to have that kind of usage again, but still. But ETN, it doesn't really have to go that well. Like, it doesn't have to go extremely well for ETN to pay off here, right? Like, we know he's a game breaker. We know they want to throw it to him. The quarterback, he's a great prospect, an all-time great prospect. So if they use him at all in the running game, then he's live. I'd like to see Robinson go right now too, because I think Robinson is worth it. But ETN is live, and especially in a tournament, you could really shoot high with him. So very tough team, I think, to figure out. Plus Chark and Chenault and Marvin Jones. I don't know. There's a lot of different outcomes there.
I think you'd like to see James Robinson go now just because it would be that close to Etienne. It'd be more fun to see what happens to those guys versus each other. But Travis Etienne, maybe he's Chase Edmonds this year, and I don't know if that's a bad thing or a good thing, but maybe they line up as Travis Etienne, or I'm sorry, as Chase Edmonds and Kenyon Drake for the Cardinals last year. What do you think about that, Jared?
I think we've been reading different stuff coming out of Jacksonville because I've seen a lot of Travis Etienne buzz in the past week. Not necessarily that he's running ahead of Robinson or whatever. I haven't really seen anything as far as that goes. We'll see. Hopefully, we get some clues in the preseason about how they're going to use those guys. But man, I'm buying Etienne at running back 23 price. I just one, I think he's a good player, and two, they spent a first round pick on him. How many running backs are first round picks in this day and age, and then don't come in and play a big role right out of the gate. So I think, Robinson could still get his 10, 12 carries per game, but I think Etienne's going to see that much and also, handle most of the pass catching work.
And that's why I stopped myself on a lot of buzz, because it's a little bit dangerous this time of year. You can hear two people say it really strongly, and it seems like more than it is because other people then amplify that. So I don't know. Maybe it's not a lot of buzz. Maybe I just happen to catch the couple people who think that James Robinson is working as the clear starting running back there.
Well, one such person might have been Jay Moyer, who has been on our Deep End show, and that's a very respectable voice, I think. I mean, even the beat writer stuff, who knows what they're getting and where they're getting it. Like if they're watching the whole practice or they've got some coach that they're trading access with, who knows? Like when it's somebody like Jay who's independent, I feel like that carries more weight. It doesn't have to be right, but it's an informed opinion. So some of the beat writer stuff is laughable. I mean, you read about whether this player has a chance to play. This player, is still on. Andy Dalton is still on track to be the starter, which means what? That they haven't officially announced that he's not. Like it's just a lot of that stuff is just worthless. But Jacksonville is kind of a puzzle. They're one of these teams that's tough to figure out right now.
Yeah, I'm looking for beat writer reports on what is actually going on at this point. I try to skip the beat writer predictions about what's going to happen because I think that some of them take a little bit too much, leeway in producing those. Yeah,
Boston Scott's not going to see the same number of touches as Miles Sanders this year. I think too with the training camp stuff, it's the drumbeat thing, and I don't know who came up with that term first, but you want Elijah Moore. It is every beat writer watching Jets practices is telling us Elijah Moore looks like the best player on the field. Trey Lance, kind of same thing. So that you want to look for the consistently positive reports from multiple sources. I think that's when you can start to buy in.
Before we get back to Adam's team here, can I say I think Matt Freeman's team is probably the prettiest build in just how the draft board stacks up with the way all the colors are working together. It's like an Italian cookie. Adam, though, has gotten, I think, several players that Mike probably expected him to take. At least Higbee, I think, collectively we expected him to land with Adam's team. So just to recap his team, Kyler Murray, Zeke Elliott, Matthew Stafford, Najee Harris, Cooper Kupp, Mike Evans, Brandon Ayuk at wide receiver 27 in round 7, and then Tyler Higbee at tight end 9 in round 8. Mike, any of those guys surprise you, or were you expecting them to land with them?
I think it's kind of cool that he gambled on Higbee through the turn and he won on that. And that's probably true of Evans too. So I don't know how he's thinking, but if he's been thinking sort of in those terms, I think at the 9, you have to do that sometimes. He probably say he's been successful in that way. We should be coming up on the Samuels pretty soon here, right? Like, those guys.
Chris.
Yeah. And Kareem Hunt should be pretty soon.
Yes.
Again, I'm just practicing for that night.
If Adam gambled that Higbee was going to make it back, I don't think it was a great bet because you look at the draft board. Like you could have guessed that Freeman wasn't going to take a tight end, but Jay Reed and Scott Connor and Ben Gretch. I'm surprised that those 4 picks pass without either of them taking the tight end. But that said, not to blow smoke up his butt, but I think Adams built a nice team here. Pretty well balanced. There, he's no weakness at any position right now.
No, don't say stuff like that out loud. He's not going to let you forget that there are no weaknesses.
He loves the Rams.
Wasn't he a Tyler Higbee buyer last year in drafts, or was that not the case?
Yes, big time.
So I think it's interesting when you see somebody who eschews the idea that this guy burned me last year. I'm going to go back to him. That's certainly the sign, I think, of an experienced player that you can overlook a player letting you down last year and focus on what could be this year.
For sure.
Next to Adam, we've got Dave Kluge's team. We had Darren Waller, Aaron Jones, Nick Chubb, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields at QB 19. That's 7 spots in QB position beyond where Trey Lance went. Of course, Justin Fields is not getting they can't keep him out of the starting lineup buzz in San Francisco, but we'll see what happens there. That's Deontay Johnson, right? Some of the D Johnsons get a little confusing here, but Deontay Johnson, Cortland Sutton, Kenny Galladay, the first 3 receivers for his team. Any particular thoughts on that roster so far, Mike?
I like his trust in the rookie quarterbacks. Sutton and Galladay are both guys where you have a little bit of concern, but they're both high-end producers when they're on the field, or they can be. Waller has just become a force in drafts. I mean, almost in any format. Now, he's almost first round in any format. I mean, maybe not like in your traditional. He's second round, though. So that's interesting. And as Jared, I think, pointed out, Aaron Jones is top 5 in running backs again tonight. Wasn't he like 5th or 6th overall the first night? So I'm fine there, too. So yeah, I think he's pretty solid. He doesn't have the pretty pattern that you like, but he's got the same positions filled mostly.
Mm-hmm. Chad Schroeder's team next to him, you got Noah Fant at tight end 10, which I think is good value. Miles Sanders at RB 22, I think that's good value there too. Adam Thielen down in the 20s again tonight, like last night. So it was a night 1 blip for him going wide receiver 13 in that draft. Kirk Cousins at QB 18, solid value. It seems to me, if you just go through every one of his picks, Chad's scooping value basically, Jared. That's what I was going to say. It's not like a sexy team. But man, Miles Sanders at RB 22, Adam Thielen, wide receiver 21. I agree. Noah Fant, tight end 10. I think I have him like a spot higher. But getting Noah Fant 1, 2, basically 3 rounds later than Dallas Goedert, kind of same deal with Higbee. I think those guys should be going a lot closer together. So yeah, I definitely think Chad has gotten a lot of value at his picks. Yeah, Noah Fant's ahead of Dallas Goedert on my board, so I'm taking him much earlier than this. So I certainly like seeing him there. On the tight ends, we saw Logan Thomas again go tight end 8 in this draft to Nick Bakai's team. That's in round 7. So also, a full round ahead of where Higbee went at tight end 9 and Noah Fant at tight end 10. So I don't know. Maybe I'm going to wind up wrong about Logan Thomas, or maybe I'm going to wind up very right. I guess we'll see where that goes.
I have to say, I have gotten to be down on Washington. There's a lot of hype there with Washington. And I think some of it is that Ryan Fitzpatrick is so well liked. Mm-hmm. But he is almost 40. He's never been on a playoff team. And there's this underlying notion that Ryan Fitzpatrick has entered into that organization is going to save them. He's going to elevate them from the status that they had before, when Alex Smith, who's had an excellent record, if you care, I mean, it's worth something maybe in his career, he could not do. So, I mean, there's just so much with Fitzpatrick. Like, you look at it a little bit closer, and Tua threw more downfield passes, or was it 20-yard passes last year than Fitz. Like, he's got this reputation, just he's going to bail you out. And I don't know, like that's just never happened where the team was good. So I think fantasy-wise, it's okay, but I would not be surprised if Washington really disappointed. And, Logan Thomas could fall into that. McLaurin, who knows? I mean, I like Gibson. I think Gibson is really strong. But team-wise, I'm not in love.
Hey, Mike, have you ever heard of the YouTube show Zach Morris's Trash, where they go back to episodes of Saved by the Bell and they point out what a jerk Zach Morris was to everyone around him, and how even though he was the popular guy and the center of attention, he was actually bringing down everybody near him? It makes me think of Ryan Fitzpatrick getting to Washington, where everybody's like, oh, finally the savior has arrived. Quarterback play has been awful, but now we've got the 40-year-old guy that has barely started 4 full seasons in his career, and he's better than what was there last year, but it's not a savior.
Well, what was the plan, right? Like, they had Haskins, who was bombing, and then Alex Smith comes back in. The plan is you want to get to the top of the draft. And their defense was great, and the division was terrible, and they couldn't get to the top of the draft. So now they have this team that's like a division champion with some good players on it. What do you do? and they just, I don't know, like it was not going to be Mac Jones, I guess, or some other plan. They didn't do what San Francisco did, and they signed Fitzpatrick out of free agency. So all I'm saying is I don't think it has to work. And there's this notion, especially in a weak division, that it will. We'll see. I mean, he's a fun guy.
You made a good point there too about their defense being very strong. So I just don't think that's going to be a shootout team, which is kind of what we want. I don't know. I guess I'm a bit more optimistic about Washington than it sounds like you guys are. I do think Fitz is a better fantasy quarterback than a real life quarterback. He's like the older Jameis Winston, where he's he might not win you a bunch of games. He's going to make some mistakes, but I also think he at least at one point had the ability to kind of elevate some of his pass catchers. Maybe he doesn't at this point anymore. Like you said, he's almost 40, which is crazy to me. I guess I didn't realize he was that old, but it's going to be tough for Antonio Gibson, Terry McLaurin, and Logan Thomas, I think, to all pay off at their ADPs because they're all going within the top 12 or so at their positions.
He's like me. He hides his age with his boyish enthusiasm.
Exactly.
He'll be 39 in November.
Wow.
Yeah. So he's almost as old as I am, even. So, Justin Boone, right next to the team that we were just talking about in Chad Schroeder, he is one of 3 teams that's still without a tight end. So he's got Josh Allen from round 1, Saquon Barkley, Ryan Tannehill, Justin Jefferson, Chris Carson, Julio Jones, Jamar Chase at wide receiver 25, right in the range where he tends to go. Mike Davis, who's awful, at RB 25, and Trey Sermon the next round at RB 29. Kidding kind of about Mike Davis, but I've made my case against him enough times so far. Jared, are you surprised that Justin's gotten this far without taking a tight end? Do you see any opportunities where maybe you would have swapped out somebody for a tight end?
I would have considered Higbee and Fant in round 7 there. Although, again, Jamar Chase at wide receiver 25, I think that's where he should be going. You see him going wide receiver 16, 17 in some drafts. And, there's only 10 tight ends off the board. So it's not like Boone's in trouble at the position yet.
Although that is a position that it gets watered down pretty quickly thereafter.
Yep, that's fair.
Yeah. He might have been on Higbee or Fant when that happened. He's at 4 running backs already.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the Chase point is, I think, the right point. I don't know when he would have taken one before. It's such a key thing in these drafts, like when do you get that first tight end? When do you take care of that? It's sometimes really tough to do depending on the flow and where you're picking. So what's he looking at now? Ingram or Gesicki at this point? It's
Jamar Chase's season is going to be very interesting either way. I would have personally taken Noah Fant in that spot and left Jamar Chase for somebody else. It's it's an okay spot value-wise. I just don't think we're going to get a special season from Jamar Chase. But no big argument against that decision there. Josh Jacobs, RB21. I think Josh Jacobs has a chance to be, I don't know, maybe, Jared, what you think that Travis Etienne could be. I think Josh Jacobs has the upside to be even a top 7 running back this year from where he's going.
Well, he was last year. He scored a bunch of touchdowns, and he was near, or he might have been even at the top of the league in like carries inside the 5 or carries inside the 10. I don't know. He's not going to do much in the passing game. The Raiders O-line, I think, is going to take a step back this season. They lost a couple starters from last year. I don't think it's going to be a great football team. And I do think, all the talk is Kenyon Drake's just going to, play a pass catching role and, basically just steal the stuff that, Jalen Richard and Devontae Booker did last year. I do think he's, more of a threat to Jacobs, early down stuff than any back that's been there, over the past 2 years behind Jacobs.
I guess it's fair to say that he's more of a threat than Devontae Booker, but it doesn't sound like the Raiders are looking to threaten Josh Jacobs. So I guess I'm just not worried about that. And I like Josh Jacobs at where he's going. Next to him, let's look at Peter Overzet's team. We've got Patrick Mahomes in round 1, as we mentioned, Jonathan Taylor, A.J. Brown, Terry McLaurin, T.J. Hawkinson at tight end 6, which I think is strong value in a tight end premium format. You could have taken him at the McLaurin spot before that, and it would have been just fine ahead of Kyle Pitts. And by the way, while we're talking about tight ends, the first couple nights, there was not a whole lot of separation between tight end 3, George Kittle, and tight end 4, Kyle Pitts. There was a lot of separation between those guys in this one, with George Kittle getting into round 1 and then Kyle Pitts at the beginning of round 4. Mike, where are you at on Kyle Pitts these days?
Very exciting. I think it'll be interesting when we get to a point where we're talking about whether he shouldn't be called a tight end. I mean, that could happen real early. Once your season starts, depending on the platform, he's gonna be a tight end. I think RT maybe wrote something about we have the right to change this, just so you know.
Wow.
So that'll be interesting. But I want to buy in. I don't really care in his case what rookie tight end history is like. There aren't many that have been. No one has been drafted as high. And it's more of a passing league. Like, I just think, I care, I respect it, but I am not undermined by it. So I want to be on board. And in this fourth round, there are probably teams that if they were my team, I would have done that. When he's going 301 or 303, I'm not going to outrace those people to Pitts. But in this draft, Jay and Scott, I think there are teams where that could have looked really good. Even Adam, right? Instead of, I don't know, I don't want to pick a player out and play that game, but I'd like him in round 4. In this format, I would definitely be ready to take him in the 4th round.
I think, though, that we know Atlanta is never going to call him a wide receiver because then they would have to pay him more when it comes to franchise tag time, just like we had with the Saints and Jimmy Graham, where he was trying to argue he was a wide receiver, and they're like, no, you're a tight end buddy, and the NFL is like, hey, team is your employer. You got to listen to him. So I think he's going to be a tight end for fantasy. We'll see where the numbers go. I'm still wary of Kyle Pitts, where he's going, but, I get the argument. You've never seen a guy drafted that high at the position, so why not say that he can put up numbers that we've never seen that high at the position? Of course, the next highest drafted tight end was TJ Hawkinson. So, he went a little thereafter. Not a whole lot of separation between Andrews and Hawkinson versus Pitts in this one, less so than in a lot of other drafts. So, we'll see where Kyle Pitts goes. Getting back to that Overzet team, T. Higgins at wide receiver 23, Ryan Fitzpatrick, QB 24, which, we just started talking negatively about Washington. I think QB 24 is a fine range for Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's certainly capable of finishing something like quarterback 18, 17 and being worthwhile there. Tyler Boyd, wide receiver 33. So 2 Bengals wide receivers to that team, even though he didn't have Joe Burrow on it, maybe because he doesn't have Joe Burrow on it. Taysom Hill at QB 27 to Peter Overzet's team. And I believe that's with Jameis Winston still on the board, right, Jared?
Yeah, it is. And I think Hill went earlier last night too. And it's not crazy because at this point, Winston hasn't separated from Hill from everything I've read out of Saints camp. It seems like they've played pretty evenly. They're splitting first team reps evenly. So I guess I'd still call Winston the favorite, but I'm not as confident as I was a month ago. And I think definitely, Hill is going to be a better fantasy bet if he's starting than Winston just because of the rushing stuff. So, Hill at quarterback 27, I think is fine. And Pete, by the way, going with a very similar strategy as he used last year. Last year he took the running back in the first round and then basically ignored the position. Tonight he takes his RB in the second round and then basically ignores the position for the next 9 picks.
I'd like to say that I'm not afraid to take Jonathan Taylor. The premise here.
In round 1? Obviously not in the first round here, but in general.
Yeah, I wouldn't really be dinging him too much, if at all. The premise is supposed to be that Wentz is actually good, and he's just not, in my mind. No, this could be looked at either way in this argument. No running back on a Wentz team has ever been that successful fantasy-wise. Ryan Matthews, maybe, and then Miles Sanders a little bit. Wentz came out. I don't think Taylor really has to be affected. Quentin Nelson could mean something in that. There's also some chance that one or both of those players is on the field by week 1 or 2. So I feel like Taylor is excellent, and maybe in drafts you have an opportunity here when people overreact to an injury to a bad quarterback. Maybe they're not better at quarterback without Wentz, but they're not going to be that much worse, I think. They did go out and get him, but I think I like Taylor a lot, and I would be fine with him at running back 6 or 7.
Yeah, I think to that point, Taylor has actually gotten a little bit more attractive for me because now he's getting into the middle of round 2. And I don't know that his situation changed a ton because of the Carson Wentz stuff. I wasn't taking him in round 1, but when he's in the middle of round 2, I think he's more attractive. We're going to bring Adam in now. We've talked about his team. Maybe he's got some words on his own team for us. Adam, how do you think things are going right now?
I mean, you tell me. You guys drafted my whole team for me, right? I mean, Mike was calling those out a round and a half ahead of time. I mean,
I guess it didn't matter too much.
How many drafts have you guys done together now?
This is what we do. We talk draft. So
this is 3. We did pros versus Joes as a team.
Yep.
And then Adam did a football guys where I just commented.
Yep. So listen,
Mike has actually been sitting here predicting your picks since I think 3:30 this afternoon.
on GR, yeah, I went through the whole.
Yeah, that's right.
I did a whole mock draft. I did a whole crack rock mock draft.
Can we talk about that for a second? How do I get crack rock on there? What is going on? That's bizarre.
Don't you work here?
Creating everything.
Right.
Take it up with the commissioner.
That's right.
All right. So, Adam, were there any players that surprised you in getting to where you took them? How hard was it for you to pass on Mike Evans at the Cooper Kupp spot?
Yeah, it was super hard because, I heard Mike talking about it earlier. Evans is going to the Hall of Fame, right? So it's hard to pass on him there. But yeah, I did it for the stack, and I love Cooper Kupp. So I want to say I was shocked that Evans fell back to me, wide receiver 19, but every podcast I talk about how awesome he is and how he always lasts too long. So, but I was shocked to see Evans fall there. And the other player that I was shocked to see fall was Higbee. Even though he only went at tight end 9, which is normally where he goes, but in this, he's been going a little bit later. But still, two of the teams behind me didn't have a tight end. So I was thrilled to see Higbee last, thrilled to see, because you can't get everybody that you want, but in this, I kind of did. So yeah, I'm super happy with the way it's gone so far.
Yeah, I don't have the previous 2 drafts in front of me to see how the tight ends fell, but it seems like they're slipping a little bit with 9 and 10 going in round 8 of tonight's draft. I think that I would probably like to get to that point of tight end a little bit earlier. I mean, it's tough to go back through individual picks and place them in earlier rounds. How are you feeling about Ayuk? Because you already mentioned the 2 wide receivers ahead of him. What are your feelings on Ayuk, a guy we talked about last night?
Yeah, like we were talking, I want to get a little bit more shares of him, and I was surprised to see that overs I didn't take him. I'm wondering if it's like doing the opposite of what I'm doing, so like he takes them all the time, so maybe he's passing on him here to get less exposure, whereas I want more exposure. But I think he went at a fair. I'm on the clock here, or in a second, so I'm not looking at the board, but I think he went at a fair price, maybe wide receiver 27 or something.
Yep.
So I think that's fine. And then I able to get, let me look.
Debo 2 rounds later.
And I got Debo. Yeah. So I love that stack. Their strength of schedule is awesome. So if they can stay healthy, I've got a lot of that passing game. And then I'm going to
and then Raheem Mostert the turn after that. So clearly you're a 49ers fan all of a sudden this season.
Yeah, and I guess I'm a Patriots tight end fan now too, because I was able to stack Henry and Jonnu. So I think I'm done at tight end for sure, I think, unless there's some crazy value later on. But yeah, I think now I'm rock solid at tight end, and now I'm going to just pound running back and receiver for a while.
Mm-hmm. Keep in mind that this draft is not even half over yet, so you got to make sure that you stay awake for it.
The show is more than half over.
Oh yeah.
That's for sure. Yeah, we've probably got another 25 minutes or so, maybe less, depending on what's going on and how sleepy Jared looks on the stream. But you'll be able to follow the draft board still on the Draft Sharks Discord. These guys are going to be drafting through round 25, so plenty more picks to go in this one. We just got Adam's pick live where he stacked Hunter Henry with Jonnu Smith, tight end 13, tight end 16. Solid spots for those guys. We'll see how things sort out there. Of course, somebody else got Cam Newton, so no stack for you on those tight ends. That might have been a few too many Patriots. Mike, what you got?
Did you think about Winston there, Adam?
I did, but then I thought about him trying to run through those cones today, and he looked like I would probably look running.
Special opportunity after that video comes out.
That's right. So, no, I it's hard because I did click on the quarterback tab, and I just like it's really hard in these super flex drafts when all the quarterbacks are gone, and I was like, man, I can take a really viable tight end or a really viable, running back or receiver, and I'm looking at like a second string quarterback possibly, or a guy in a timeshare is competing. So it's hard. The whole idea of taking 2 quarterbacks in the first 3 rounds is so that I don't have to make that decision and reach for someone like Winston. So yeah, I mean, if the price is right in the coming rounds here, I'll pull the trigger, but I wanted to kind of double down on that advantage of taking 2 early quarterbacks to be able to not have to do that here.
Yeah, it's super flex best ball, so you don't need to start 2 quarterbacks.
Right.
It's best ball, and you have 25 roster spots, so you can build in depth where even on Stafford's bye week, or even if Stafford throws up a dud, if you're strong enough at the other positions, you can get a solid score out of that super flex spot.
Yeah.
Do you think that being a flag football quarterbacking legend yourself makes it more difficult to settle for a lower level QB?
Absolutely. 100%. 100%. But what did you guys think? I was kind of shocked to see, I don't know if you guys talked about this yet, the running backs, did they fall tonight more than they normally did? I mean, I had my choice of Najee Harris and Mixon in the 4th round. I thought that was pretty wild.
You chose wrong, by the way.
Did I? The Bengals, there's nothing but negative stuff coming out of Bengals camp, I feel like. Nothing about Mixon, but just the Bengals in general. And I get a chance to feast my eyes on Najee Harris tonight. So I think that's probably it.
Bet on the Bengals. Bet on the Bengals before the next news cycle.
That is true.
Well, that's my thing with the shares question is, we talk a lot about exposures and you try to get exposure to everybody. But even when you're choosing for a single team, I mean, I don't see a whole lot of difference between Joe Mixon and Najee Harris, at least at this point, without knowing how things are going to go inside the season. They're both workhorses on teams that could have issues or could be fine. They're going to get plenty of work. So, I mean, I don't know. It's one or the other for me at this point.
I want to see Jameis and Mooney here from Nick. That's what I want from Nick. Come on, Nick.
The Schwam.
Well, I'd hate to break it to you, but Nick took Cole Beasley, so it wasn't Jameis.
Oh, the next guy took Mooney and Winston.
Just missed.
Yeah.
Bare knuckle.
Bare knuckle. Yo, Mike's ready. Let's go.
All right. Right after Adam decided to load up on 49ers, Dave Kluge followed his 3 wide receiver run with another wide receiver, Antonio Brown, at wide receiver 37. That's the second straight night that he's gone inside the top 40, so maybe he's climbing in general. Jared, have you seen Antonio Brown climbing in ADP elsewhere? I haven't noticed whether he's gotten above 40 in those areas.
There have been a lot of play-by-play tweets of Antonio Brown catching touchdowns from Tom Brady early in training camp. So I'm guessing that, nudged his ADP up 3 or 4 spots.
I feel like I've seen more why did anybody shoot a video of that clips this year than other years. I know that's a thing all the time, but it's like, here is running back drills and the guys are like, and they catch a ball. I don't know. I think people are getting a little maybe overexcited about getting to see football in person again and being impressed by things that shouldn't impress anybody. Dave followed the wide receivers with Cam Newton, Carson Wentz, Michael Pittman for the stack there. If we do get Carson Wentz back early in the season, that could be a nice, cheap stack that would have gone earlier in this draft had we not had the foot injury for Carson Wentz. Adam, are you scared of the Carson Wentz, Michael Pittman stack here?
No.
Yeah.
I'm not. And it's too bad. I really did want some Pittman, but I think there's still time. There's still 3 weeks to see what happens, and I might have to get my shares closer to when the season starts.
Campbell.
That's right. Shh.
Jared, I think that Chad Schroeder is still scooping value on his team after the Noah Fant pick. He's got Derek Carr at QB 28. He's got Mike Williams at wide receiver 43. Irv Smith, who I know is probably valued to you at tight end 12. You like him better than I do. And is that Marvin Jones at wide receiver 53 that you just got?
It is, yep. Marvin Jones, undervalued every year. I mean, people don't want to hear it because, there's a lot of buzz on Chark and Chenault, and I'm excited about those guys too. But I think there's a decent chance that Marvin Jones leads that team in targets this season.
And I mean, even beyond Jaguars, we've got Marvin Jones in round 12. We've got Kenny Galladay in round 8. They're 22 spots apart in wide receiver ADP. Would it shock anybody here if Marvin Jones outscored Kenny Galladay?
No.
No, it wouldn't shock me. It's football.
Right.
It should be time for Zach Ertz pretty soon.
he went well. Drafts are running together in my brain now, where I saw him go earlier in one draft, and I don't remember if it was last night. So I guess I shouldn't comment on how early he went last night if I'm not sure. Robert Tonyan went inside the top 12 again, and I think it's noteworthy that Robert Tonyan has gone inside the top 12 the past 2 nights to a couple of guys who tend to do well in the accuracy rankings, Jared, to Justin Boone tonight, to John Paulson last night. I mean, I wonder if I guess there's some rebound on Robert Tonyan now that we do have Aaron Rodgers back in Green Bay.
Well, Paulson's a Packers fan, so that might have something to do with that. But I mean, you need a volume boost from Tonyan if he's going to pay off, because he's not going to score touchdowns at that rate again. I mean, he could get the volume boost. He is still an ascending player. I've read some positive stuff on him. The coaching staff has been talking him up over the past couple of weeks, and just how much he has improved. So it's possible with Rodgers back there now, and he's still a good touchdown bet. I mean, Rodgers is going to throw 30+ touchdowns, and they're not all going to go to Devontae Adams.
Mm-hmm. And Justin was one of the longest waits on the first tight end, then started with Tonyan as his 11th in round 11. I would not have guessed that in round 11 you would find the 11th tight end off the board, followed with Adam Troutman. So that's another upside guy. We'll see what happens with the Saints, folks. The other 2 teams that waited as long, one still doesn't have any tight ends. That's the Jay Reed and Scott Connor team. Next to them, Mike Gesicki at tight end 14, Evan Ingram at tight end 15. So for Ben Gretsch, that's another solid pair after you wait a while. That's the 11-12 turn, getting tight end 14 and 15, and a couple guys who both have top 12 finishes behind them, so you can certainly see that the upside is there.
Well, if you ever watch Ship Chasing, you have Pete and Ben in this draft, and neither one has RB2 yet, and it's not at all surprising, right?
You think it's a competition between them now to see who can
be.
wait longer to get the second one?
It might be. There might be another show going up against the Olympics where they're talking about who can outlast the other as far as that goes. I don't know. Yeah, maybe.
The other thing it looks like Ben has done is he's been double dipping on positions. He goes 2 wide receivers at 1-2. He goes 2 quarterbacks at 5-6. He takes all those wide receivers and he double dips at tight end. I kind of like that when you're on the turn. Just fortifying one position with those 2 picks when you have to wait a long time before your next turn comes up.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's a matter of the tiers, how they fall for him there, knowing what has a chance to make it back to him and what doesn't. So I think it's working out well. Got the quarterbacks that we mentioned earlier, got the tight ends most recently. The wide receivers you just talked about, Odell Beckham, Laviska Shenault, Will Fuller, DJ Chark, upside to all those guys, and he started with Tyreek Hill and Stephon Diggs, so he can afford to have them play around with who's putting up spike weeks. Next to the Justin Boone team, we had Mark Garcia, who has followed his quarterbacks. He had a surprising pick that we never really got to in round 5. Deshaun Watson, QB 17 off the board. So I think that's Mark playing for the possibility of that trade to Philly. Don't you think, Jared?
Yeah, I mean, this is 72 teams are we at now, or is it even more than that? But I mean, he's trying to win the whole thing, and if Watson plays the full season, I mean that's a smash pick. And even if you get 12 games out of him, he's probably going to beat a quarterback 17 ADP.
Now, are you surprised that after waiting for the 16th quarterback and then taking Watson as a 17th, that Mark then waited until QB 30 with Jared Goff in round 10 to take his third? Does that surprise you, Mike?
No, this is your game theory guy, right?
Yep.
So he's playing, against the assumption that Watson will be suspended, and he's not on that list. We've already covered that. 6 running backs through 13 is hefty. Brandon Cooks is somebody I thought we would talk about tonight. Maybe he was, I think, wide receiver 40 last night and 32 here. You mentioned, and I like the point last night, Matt, about Kittle. Like he's a player where there'd be a wide range of opinions. I think so is Cooks. I mean, if you give Houston any credit for being able to throw the ball in losing efforts, and that's got to set up great for Brandon Cooks. I mean, Nico Collins will be drafted tonight too, and maybe also him, but it's pretty thin. And Taylor, if Taylor's the quarterback, one thing he did, maybe Adam is ready to smack me for this, I don't know, but I thought Taylor threw a beautiful deep ball. They just didn't do a lot of it. I mean, they were a run-first team under Rex, so he can deliver that ball. I don't know how long he'll be on the field. I think Cooks is live. Mm-hmm. I like him in these rounds where you're putting him up against guys who are hurt or guys who are third or fourth options.
Yeah, no, he definitely threw a great deep ball. He was always good. He was, from what the quarterback people were saying, was he was always good when he didn't have to throw with anticipation. So a lot of those deep balls, there's open space, throw it there, and hopefully Sammy Watkins can go get it, right? So yeah, he does throw a very nice deep ball. He's good at buying time for that too. So yeah, maybe if a doctor doesn't puncture his lung again, we'll be able to see what he can do with Brandon Cooks this year.
I mean, Cooks is just a talented receiver who's like a lock for 120 plus targets, and he might get like 140 targets. So wide receiver 32 is about where I think he should go. He does usually go, 8 to 12 wide receiver spots after that.
And he's been traded multiple times. How many guys get traded multiple times? He probably should be traded again.
When he puts up 1,000 yards wherever he goes, too, as like 4 different teams now, he's gone for 1,000 yards at every spot.
Like if Houston really wants to do this, they should trade Brandon Cooks to a team that loses a guy. I mean, the Saints have already lost somebody. They've already also had Brandon Cooks. So I don't know. Maybe he sort of lucks out in that way too, fantasy-wise.
I'm sure he wishes he could get traded to a different spot at this point. We were talking about Mark Garcia and the game theory, and Mike, you mentioned that he's got 6 running backs through round 13 already. It's interesting to look at the specific players that he picked, because he started with Austin Eckler, David Montgomery, Josh Jacobs, locked-in starters for their teams. Those next 3, Tony Pollard, Latavius Murray, Alexander Madison. So all handcuffs that drafters in general like. Putting all of them on his team is saying one of those guys is likely to break through. Maybe none of them do, but taking all 3 of them on the same roster means he doesn't have to bet on one doing it. He just has to bet on one of 3 doing it.
Yes, and that's a good point. He also has Kelsey here, so he might have shied away from like I don't know, Troutman, I guess, would have been going this way. One of these other tight ends in the middle where you'd have a backup there. If he had a lesser tight end, he might have been inclined to do that. But when you have Kelsey, you feel that extra power where you can maybe go all night without a second tight end on your roster.
How do you guys feel though about taking those 3 handcuff running backs when he drafted 3 of the top 21 running backs off the board? Like, he obviously expects those guys to start for him most of the week. So to me, taking especially all 3 of those handcuff running backs, to me seems like overkill. But we'll have to have Mark on the podcast and get his thoughts on it.
I mean, you only need 2 running back starters every week, so you get through those 3 guys to fill those 2 spots. Right. I'm still reeling, though, from Mike turning Travis Kelce dirty. I mean, he's feeling the power of Kelce. He can go all night afterward. I don't know, man. I'm not sure I'm ready for this one. We got to change the rating on this pod.
Yeah, well, sorry.
I don't know. So in seriousness, Jared, I think that it's just saying I feel good about those 3 up top. Maybe he takes another guy later on, but it's saying one of these 3 guys is going to break through because somebody's going to get hurt. So I'm going to take 3 of these high upside handcuffs rather than just one of them and take a chance that I get something from them.
Yeah, I get that. To me, that's just a strategy more for like a 0 RB team or a team like Pete or Ben that only took 1 running back in the first few 10 rounds.
Yeah, but I think when you have 25 roster spots to play with, and you don't need kickers, you don't need defenses. I mean, you don't have to be pigeonholed to 0 RB. It can work however you want because he could still go all wide receivers and 1 more tight end from here.
Which I think is what he should do at this point.
Yeah. So next to Mark's team, who do we have at number 4? Can't see the names up top, but we got
Overzet.
Oh, yeah, Peter Overzet. Still no running back on his team. Oh, no, he took J.D. McKissick, so still no second running back on his team. Henry Ruggs right before that, Cole Kmet, tight end 18, Nicole Hardman before that, Marquise Brown, Taysom Hill. So it was Pete. He probably felt like he could do it because Ben Gretsch went and took a second and third running back at the 13-14 turn. So Pete won that battle with Ben waiting out for that second running back.
Toughest thing to do in sports, repeat.
Ben getting James Conner at RB 45. I think he did very well to get him as his RB2 after waiting for that long.
Yeah, and he's been going at least double at the same position for what's that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 straight turns now, and 6 of 7. So definitely a pattern to his drafting.
I think what Pete Overzet did with quarterbacks is really interesting with Fitzpatrick and Hill. I mean, I might be simplifying it from following him and watching him so much, but I would have sooner expected one or the other, I guess, in there, and then one more receiver. But nonetheless, we see lots of receivers up and down that list, and Fitzpatrick and Hill. Maybe they both start all year and work out. I don't know.
Well,
I guess I would have predicted different.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the thing with Fitzpatrick is I think on a per game basis, I think he'll beat quarterback 24. But to me, he's a poor bet to play all 17 games. So if he is your quarterback too, I think it was smart for Pete to get a third quarterback shortly thereafter.
Yeah, we'll see how smart it was to get Taysom Hill, which will be interesting. Daniel Jones, by the way, fairly late in this one, quarterback 26. I know that there's not a whole lot to like out of Giants camp right now, but Daniel Jones seems pretty late to me at QB 26. I like him better than Ryan Fitzpatrick and Zach Wilson, at least on par with Ben Roethlisberger because he has the rushing.
Yeah, I didn't want to be as high on Jones as I kind of was a few weeks ago. And now with all the stuff out of Giants camp and Kenny Galladay banged up, it's kind of giving me excuse to back off Daniel Jones a little bit.
That's the thing, though, is you can still be low on him and call him QB 22, and that's still high on him in a lot of drafts. You wind up getting him. So that's my issue is I didn't end up taking him a whole lot early in draft season just because I was taking another quarterback in QB 18, 19 range, and it was before Daniel Jones even came up for me in ADP. But I mean, that he's just lingering so long. He's the kind of player that nobody wants at this point. Anything interesting in the past couple rounds that you've seen, Adam, now that you're past your round 15 pick?
Yeah.
So you got Mac Jones just in case he gets on the field with your tight end stack.
No, he'll definitely get on the field. You have to remember Cam Newton threw 8 touchdowns last year, which is impossible in 2020 in 15 games. So he'll definitely get on the field. And when he does, I'll have Henry and Jonnu, which is pretty sweet. I wasn't even really planning on going for Jones there, but when I saw it and kind of thought about it, I think it made sense. I got sniped. So when I took Fournette in the 13th, I was really debating over Jared's boy Rondale Moore to go with Kyler Murray, or James Conner to go with Kyler Murray. And I said, one of those guys will make it back to me. So I took Fournette as RB 43 with it, which I think is pretty sweet. And of course, both those guys went. So that was a little disappointing, but I was okay with getting Emmanuel Sanders there. But yeah, other than that, everything's pretty much, Kiki QT, I think I don't know, it's a little early for him usually, but again, he's wide receiver 65. So you can't really complain there. But other than that, everything's par for the course, I think.
I believe this is the third straight draft that we've seen Teddy Bridgewater go ahead of Drew Lock, even though it sounds to me like Drew Lock has been impressing more than Teddy Bridgewater has so far. Is that what you've heard, Jared?
Yeah, I'd say it sounds like Lock is in the lead, but not by a ton. But yeah, if I had to guess right now, it'd be Lock under center week 1 for Never. I think both guys are gonna see the field this year though.
Yeah, I would guess so too, and I'm not planting a flag either way. But if I'm picking between them, it's Drew Lock for me. Plus, he's the higher upside, point scorer among them, I believe, because of the deeper ADOT stuff.
Yeah. On Cam Newton, real quick, he is 4. Adam's got his passing touchdowns 8. You know how many rushing touchdowns he had last year?
15.
12. In fact, he is 4 away from Earl Campbell for his career. 7 away from Tony Dorsett for his career. 70 rushing touchdowns. Now, you're going to tell me Josh Allen will probably pass that number, which maybe
how many passing touchdowns would Earl Campbell have had for the Patriots?
Fewer than 8.
Maybe.
But 70 rushing touchdowns, more than Todd Gurley, and it's more than Eddie George.
It's true.
Just like what an interesting career he's had. I have said on Newton, like my bet is that he still has something left. I think there were a lot of obvious circumstances working against him last year. Very late start to joining the Patriots, COVID, the limited practices, and he had that shoulder injury and then foot injuries. Maybe he's better. Is that a franchise that places that double down bet on Newton if they don't have reason to think he can bounce back? Maybe it won't happen, but I think that's a team intending to win, and Jones is there for their future. They're sort of middling it there, but I am not done with Newton.
I think Adam is. I'm not done with Newton either. I don't think it's an exciting situation either way, but I agree that there's a chance that Cam Newton is, at least a fair amount better than he was last year.
I mean, 12 rushing touchdowns. You know that how that season started with the worst weapons in the league. I mean, he was startable until he got sick.
Mm-hmm.
And that game in Kansas City that he missed, and then it was really pretty much awful after that. But I like Newton. I like Myers a little bit. I don't know if we're there yet. I don't think we are. But he did just go. Okay, well, we've been on a long time.
There you go. Wide receiver 74 off the board. So we're more than halfway through all the wide receivers that will get picked tonight. Adam, do you have any parting shots before we start to wrap this thing up?
No, I think quick on Cam. I just think, I don't mind rushing quarterbacks. Obviously, they're high upside. 12 rushing touchdowns is great, but with an older quarterback that relies on really taking a lot of punishment to get his yards and get his touchdowns, I think it's hard for me to if I have to bet on one or the other, I'll take Mac Jones. But yeah, no. As far as my draft parting shots, I was happy the way that it's turned out. I went in wanting to get 2 quarterbacks in the first 4 rounds, and I was going to take Hawkinson in the 4th, and there was too much running back value there. So I'm happy with the start. I'm happy with I got my guys, and we'll see.
Xavier Jones there.
Yeah, I've heard some positive things out of camp with him. It's Henderson's had trouble staying healthy. And he's normally been going a little bit higher than this, but again, this is a super flex. But I'll take a shot on Xavier Jones as why can't he be Alexander Madison or Gus Edwards if there's an injury to the starter?
Because he's Xavier Jones.
Come on, RB doesn't matter. We know that.
Don't you know Nico Collins was still on the board?
I know. I have him queued up. We'll see if he makes it back.
Jared, any parting shots from you?
No, it's been a fun 3 nights. I'm glad to have a break from talking to you guys for the next few, but we'll be back at it next week for 3 more.
We're drafting on Tuesday. I think
yes. So I will not be talking to you. I'm going to be focusing on my draft next Tuesday.
There you go. I guess I'm going to be talking more. We'll see exactly who's talking to me. Adam, you'll be back with me that night, right?
I'll be back. Oh yeah.
Mike, any closing thoughts for tonight?
I'm so happy to be involved in this with you guys. I can't believe I'm in these tournaments, but I love it. It's really an honor. And Adam and I are going to Canton next weekend for the Expo, and then Vegas for some shows out there. Also the Bare Knuckle Challenge after the opening night game, and then the main event that week too. So really an exciting time. And I'm trying to memorize these boards as we speak, which is fun but challenging.
You guys get to do all the fun stuff while me and Matt slave away at our keyboards.
I know. It's not as fun as it sounds. Okay, we're gonna end up with Cam Newton. It
is.
Vegas is not as fun as it sounds.
It is at least as fun as it sounds.
Well, Mike, thank you for balancing out Jared's negativity with your positivity. I appreciate it. Thank you for joining us tonight.
I get that all the time.
That's going to do it for us for night 3 of the Draft Sharks Invitational. Head over to Draft Sharks Discord if you want to keep tracking this action through the end. There is still another, 8.5 rounds to go. You can find the links in YouTube, on the Facebook description, on any podcast description, wherever you're listening to this, beyond the fact. It's free to join the Discord, so come join us there, talk about fantasy football. There's a lot of people already talking about it and showing their teams. Of course, you can get ready for your own drafts by becoming a DS Insider, gaining access to the all-new Draft War Room. We will customize our award-winning projections to fit your league specs, sync with your draft, help you dominate your opponents. For Jared Smola, Mike Shope, Adam Krautwurst, and the rest of the Draft Sharks crew, I'm Matt Schaaf saying thanks so much for swimming with us.